Hey everyone, how's it going? Azren here, Calgary Language Nerds owner. Today I'm recording part two of yesterday's masterclass. Let's start with a quick recap of the masterclass yesterday. If you didn't watch it, please go watch that first. It is a prereq for today's part two. So in short, yesterday we talked about different self-study exercise ideas. We talked about how they're super important because without a good idea of how to self-study, reaching fluency is generally impossible. We talked about how much time you should be spending, right? So we looked at, for example, 15 minutes a day leading to a level up in 3 years, and 3 hours a day leading to a level up in about 3 months. And of course, we have everything in between. So that's something we talked about in the masterclass yesterday as well. And lastly, we looked at some really common self-study exercises. We looked at teach yourself courses, apps, podcasts that teach you any structured self-study course. We talked about self-talk, talking to yourself out loud. We talked about different listening activities, grammar activities, worksheets, reading, journaling, mimicry, shadowing. These are the 10 that we talked about. And those are the 10 that I chose because they're the easiest ones to do. They're super easy to explain to you, and they're super easy for you to go and do them. Straightforward. And then lastly, yesterday, we talked about the difference between acquisition and learning. So learning, let's start with that. Learning is more conscious. This is where you study. It's conscious learning. Acquisition is the opposite. This happens much more naturally. This is absorption. This is how babies learn languages. And we talked about how both of them are very, very important. As adults, if we balance acquisition with learning, that creates a really positive result. So we talked about how the 10 common self-study activities I provided, some of them are more learning focused, some of them are more acquisition focused, some of them balance both. So that's a really fast summary of yesterday's part one of this masterclass. Now, today I want to talk to you about another self-study activity, which is very, very, very effective, but it's actually much more difficult to do. Yesterday, I wanted to only give you stuff that was easy to understand, easy to implement. Keep it really simple. Today, we're going to go to level 201. We're going to go to a more advanced level and introduce you an immersion style of activity. People think that you have to travel to another country to get immersion. This is not true. You can manufacture an immersive environment literally right now in your home. Here's how to do it. You carve out a chunk of time, 1 hour, 2 hours, 30 minutes, 6 hours. It actually doesn't matter how long. The longer, the better. And for that period of time, we do two things. Thing number one, we remove all input, reading and listening, that is not in the language you're learning. In other words, you only listen to and you only read the language that you're learning. Step two, we control our thoughts and we only think in the language that we're learning. So we do those two things. You have to do this when you're alone. If you're with people talking, it's not going to work. But if you're in your house, 6 p.m. after work, you have an hour, do that. I'll tell you a story. So today I did that for about 2 hours today. I had a 2 hour chunk of, basically 2 hours. I had a basically 2 hour chunk of time. I went to the gym and saw my trainer in between. So whatever, you get the point. I had this mostly uninterrupted chunk of time. And here's what happened. I was only thinking in Ukrainian. I was only listening to Ukrainian, in my case, music. And my brain switched over. Your brain flips and it flips over into the language that you're trying to learn. So much so that when I got to the gym and saw my trainer, it was actually weird to see him and talk in English. It was very peculiar. I wanted to say, hey, привіт, як справи? I wanted to switch to Ukrainian, but I couldn't. Obviously, he doesn't speak Ukrainian. And so this is a very, very effective activity to do that I'd highly recommend. Okay. A couple of best practices for this activity. Best practice number one, be willing to abandon thoughts. Be willing to abandon thoughts. What does that mean? Well, sometimes you'll have a thought that you want to think, but you don't know how to do that in the language that you're trying to learn, right? You might not know how. You're more than welcome to abandon that thought and just let it go. It's okay to let it go, right? This type of activity is a flow. We go back to my screen share for those watching the video and not the podcast. If we go back to this video, right, we have a mixture of acquisition and learning. Learning is structured. Acquisition is messy. So this activity is acquisition heavy. It'll be messy. So you will let go of thoughts because you don't know how to say them. right? You're not going to be looking up every single word and living with your translator. No, this is just what flowing and feeling this language, right? You can make up words. That's another tip. Let's say you don't know how to say something and you're like, oh no, I don't know that. You could abandon the thought or you can make up a word. Be like, well, it would probably be something like this and make it up. Feel it out. It doesn't matter right now if you're right or wrong. You're feeling the language. Think about babies when they're experimenting. They just blabber and they just feel things out, right? You're feeling it out like a child would feel it out. You can even replace a thought you don't know with an English word. You can say something like, you know, "Ya idu na gym." I am going to the gym. If I don't, I know the word for gym, but if I didn't know the word for gym in Ukrainian, I might say "Ya idu," and I can say "na." I don't know. Is that the right grammar point? Pfft, who knows? I'm just going to say it. "Ya idu na gym," and I already know that's a very wrong sentence. It doesn't matter. You're feeling it out, and you're trying to flow as much as you can. This is not the time to nitpick on yourself. This is the time to get into the language. Another pro tip as well is if you're someone who thinks in words, which a lot of people do, it will probably be helpful, at least for me, to the best of your ability, switch your thinking into pictures. Probably because you might be very used to thinking in your first language and thinking in words. Very difficult to stop thinking, and it's very difficult to stop thinking in English and think in your target language when the English thought comes first. Do you know what I mean? If the English thought comes first and it's in English, well, now the thought is made in English, you're thinking in English. So you may want to think through emotions and pictures. So, me, for example, that's what I was doing. I would think through, I would just feel through emotions and pictures, which is not my typical way of thinking, by the way. And so it's a completely different way of immersing yourself and getting into the language. This style of activity is difficult to do. It's not something you can just instantly just go and do like the other 10 activities I gave you, but it's hyper powerful. It will supercharge let's share my screen again. It will supercharge your acquisition process. Again, this is not a learning activity. It's not a studying conscious activity. This is supercharging your acquisition process. This is supercharging the baby in you, right? That sounds so funny. It's supercharging the way that children learn language, the way they flow into it and absorb it and just feel it out. That's what you're doing with this activity. Highly recommended. I've done it a lot in my life. And I was doing it today and it felt very, very, very powerful by the time I was done. So that's that. That is part 2 of our masterclass. Hope you guys liked it. Hope you got the nice surprise. I didn't tell you there's a part 2, so nice surprise for you. And yeah, have a good day. Bye bye. See you.